So you've been thinking about making videos? Well, we're here today to give you some tips and tricks of the trade, which are going to hopefully give you a better understanding of videography as a whole, along with make sure you have fun shooting.
Now, before we get into our starter pack in videography, it's good to note that it may be a little bit intimidating at first, but it's because there's a lot to cover, and hopefully we'll be here to break it down for you guys.
Most definitely. We're going to go over cameras, we're going to go over lenses, we're going to go over composition, we're going to go over lighting, we're going to go over audio, we're going to go over video editing, and hopefully these all together, these broad concepts will help you give you a platform and a baseline foundation knowledge of what you need to do moving forward.
Let's hop right in.
Cool.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is cameras, and the reason why we're talking about cameras first is because you can't really make a video without one.
And if you don't have access to a camera, you at least likely have access to your cell phone. There are many apps in the app stores such as Filmic Pro that range from about $10 to $15 that will give you a wide range of manual controls.
But if you do have access to a camera, it really is beneficial because you have a wide variety of control over your ISO, shutter speed, aperture, which is all part of the exposure triangle, which we will talk about later.
Some affordable cameras on the market include the Sony A6000 series, the Canon EOS M series, and the Panasonic GH5 series. All of these cameras offer at least full HD.
And another big thing about these cameras is that they have interchangeable lenses.
Lenses. What are lenses? Lenses is the glass in front of your sensor that allows your subject to be in focus. There's two things that are measured on a lens. One, your field of view, which has to do with your millimeters, or how wide or how tight your lens is. The lower the number, the wider the field of view, and you'll get this really wide shot. The higher the number, the tighter the field of view, and you get a zoom lens. The second number you need to look for is your f-stop or your aperture, and that has to do with how much light is let into the lens. And the smaller the number, the wider your aperture is going to be, which is going to give you that shallow depth of field, which makes a nice blurry background, like portrait mode.
A couple things to keep in mind when looking for buying lenses would be your focal length, your aperture, and the quality of glass. A few things to keep in mind is to always make sure your lens is clean, and that lenses are an investment, though a cheap add-on like a microfiber that goes for a few dollars can really help them last a lot longer.
Yeah, so now you have this equipment, you have your camera, you have your lenses. Let's talk about composition. So it's pretty simple to tell. Does this look good? I don't think so. And this has to do with too much headroom. Headroom is the distance between the top of your head and the top of the frame. So when you have your subject framed up, you want to make sure it's a little bit less than this and squished and just looks even and proportional. What about this room? This is called eye room. It's the distance between your eyes and the offset side of the frame. It's honestly not too hard to tell if the frame looks good or bad. But why?
While composition is subjective, there is some science behind it. So let's bring in our good friend Asher.
So the appeal of the rule of thirds probably falls into our evolutionary history. You see, as an animal that needs to consume other animals to survive, being able to recognize patterns like bilateral symmetry indicates life rather than non-life. So our need to recognize these patterns is probably seated way back in our evolution.
Wow,
That's pretty dope.
So now that we've figured out composition, let's talk about lighting. Lighting is huge. So first we're going to teach you about the key light. And your key light is going to be your main source of light. And that's going to be what defines your subject. For us, we have one key light coming in here, which leaves this half of my face a little bit darker than this half. If you're shooting outside, maybe use the sun as your key light. You could also use it as a backlight. You can do a ton of different stuff with lighting, and it's all up to your creative decision. So let's talk about bad lighting. Bad lighting may be overexposed or maybe underexposed. If it's overexposed, it's gonna be blown out, the whites are gonna be washed out, and you won't be able to recover anything in post-production if you try to color grade or color correct. Being underexposed means everything is crushed too dark and you can't pull up, and your image is also ruined. So finding that nice in between is where your cinematic lighting is gonna be.
Let's talk about audio. Two key things to keep in mind regardless of what microphone you're using are direction and proximity. In general, the closer you have your audio source, the better, and the farther apart, the more distant it's going to sound. Similarly, if you have your microphone pointed towards your subject, it's going to sound better. If you have it pointed away, it's going to sound like... Just remember that what you hear is just as important as what you see.
So now that we've shot all this great footage, now what? Let's edit. So the three main reasons people normally edit video is to cut, compile, and to connect. When cutting footage, we're simply just trimming away all the excess fat and cutting all the unnecessary content. And I think that's like the biggest mistake beginners make, is they just leave way too much space in between their clips, and there's just too much unnecessary content. We all know that one person that takes a snap on Snapchat for a few seconds too long, and that's definitely what you don't want to do when you're making a video. So next is to compile, and compiling is really just the process of rearranging your clips to create a narrative and really make sure you have flow in your video. And lastly is to connect. The whole point of creating videos is to tell a story and to connect to an audience, and using cutting, compiling, connecting, and all will formulate to create a great video. So a few editing softwares that I recommend are iMovie, Final Cut Pro, and Adobe Premiere Pro. If you intend on doing this long term, I really recommend using Adobe Premiere Pro because it really is the industry standard, and if you start now, it really is good to get used to in the long run. Although it is a monthly payment, so that is something to keep an eye out for. I would also recommend Final Cut Pro, which is very user-friendly, is probably the most user-friendly out of all of them, and has only one upfront cost. But if you can't really afford those at the moment, especially as a beginner, I would definitely recommend using iMovie, which can be found for free on your phone or on your MacBook Pro. And really, any software that can cut and compile will work. Biggest thing is that you practice, and you will get better at making videos.
Hopefully this tutorial has given you a general understanding of what goes into video production.
And we'll definitely go way more into depth about a lot of the subjects that we cover today, because really there's so much, and today we just kind of skimmed the surface on a lot of them. And comment below if you have any suggestions on what you want to hear. We'd love to make videos for you guys, so thank you so much.